Hello to our tremendous leadership family and friends. I am here today with Tim Woodward, and Tim sent me an email about 2 weeks ago, and it said tribute to your father. So I immediately clicked on it and got introduced to Tim, and he just said in the email, I have a story I need to share with you about your father. Please let me know when you have time to talk about it. So, hence, Tim and I made the connection, and Tim shared with me the story that he had about my father, and primarily the transformative power of books. And I said, Tim, this is so tremendous. I would love to share this with our friends because I know all of you out there listening, you understand that you will be the same person 5 years from now, except for two things: the books you read and the people that you meet. So I want to introduce you to Tim, let him tell the story about a book that he pulled off a shelf blind, how it changed his life, and how it continues to change his life this very day. So, Tim, thank you so much for being here today.
No problem, Tracy. It all started uh, about 25 years ago, and it goes back to the time when my son was a teenager. And those are always challenging times when you're raising your kids. And Charlie actually joked about it in the book, I think, about how you get your kids to read books. And so um, it was a time when my son was a little bit rebellious, and so I was looking for something to connect with him. Um, and so I thought I'll go in, or maybe I can find a book that would give me some advice of how to connect with him. And so I went into a Christian bookstore in Fresno, and the more I started to look, the more confused I got because there were all these. Most of the books were by pastors, and there were big promos and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, well, I can't read a 400-page book and figure out how to connect with my son. So um, I was kind of lacking some hope at that point. And I literally just prayed, would you just put something in front of me that would connect my son and I? And so I looked up at this bookcase, and there's all these books in it, but there's this single book with a white. It looked very small. Um, that was white in the bookcase, and I walked over to it, and it was very thin. And I thought, well, maybe that's a simple answer to a prayer. So I pulled it out, and sure enough, I started reading the cover, and I thought, this is exactly what I need. So I bought the book. I went home, and I read the book, and it immediately appealed to me. And I thought, at that point, I was working for a company and traveling, and I had about a 10-day trip that was scheduled to go through Arizona and Nevada. And I thought, and it was summertime, so my son was out of school, and I thought, well, would you like to make a road trip? That was the way I presented it to him. And he said yes. And so we loaded stuff in the car, and off we went. And so Charlie in the book said, don't trust your kids to read, bribe them. And it was really a time when I thought, yeah, I have to just figure out how to get the content of the book into a discussion. And so I said, well, what we're going to do is one day I'm going to read one chapter out loud. And then the next day you read a chapter out loud. And by the third day, at first he grumbled. And by the third morning, he said, when are we going to read the book? And so, yeah, books, I don't know. It's about 100 pages, I think, is all. And we just whizzed through the book. And we start talking about things, and I said, what are you interested in? What do you, what would you like to read? Because he's a smart kid. So we, on that trip, I think we read the Motley Fool Investment Guide, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He wanted to get into finance and stuff. And so we did that. And just that process of reading together and of finding out what his interests were, and him buying the concept of, well, if I read, I'm going to learn things, but I want to learn the things that I want to learn, not what Dad's going to tell me to think. So I guess the next chapter of that is that I was still working for the same company, and I was on the road, and I was, I told Charlie this when I met him. I'm probably the worst salesman that ever existed. And so I got one of the guys with the company had a heart attack, and they needed somebody to go back east. And they call on some clients that he needed to talk to and stuff. So I went to New Jersey and Pennsylvania predominantly. And so I was driving back, and they booked all these appointments, and I was thinking, am I going to make the plane even? And my last appointment canceled. So now I had like 4 hours, and I'm driving through Pennsylvania and heading to Philadelphia, and all of a sudden I see the town that Charlie lived in. So I thought, and I knew that I had researched enough that I knew that Charlie owned a bookstore. I wasn't quite sure exactly what it was. And so I thought, well, I'm going to stop and see if I can meet Charlie and just thank him for what the book did for my son and I. And so I'm driving, and it was in a strip mall, if I remember correctly. And I just remember this big boat of a car and this hand kind of waving me to go first. And so I did. And this guy that got out looked like, we call it Yeti, kind of so big and everything. And I see him go around the corner, and I think, maybe that's Charlie. So I go in and follow him. And I think it was your mom that was at the front. Whoever it was had a sense of humor, because I said, is Charlie in? And do you think he'd have a minute to me? And I think, like I said, I think it was your mom. And she said, you don't know Charlie very well, because he'll talk to you for an hour, So I went back, and I told Charlie the story of what it had meant to my son and my relationship, but also the seed that it planted for him, for my son, and just kind of allowed him to just express to me the things that he wanted to do with his life. And so I started talking to Charlie, and, when he shook my hand, I was afraid he was going to crush it. He was so big. And I told him the story, and this great big guy, there's tears running down, and he said, thank you for sharing that. And he said, well, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm the guy that works for the company that doesn't sell much. Right? And he said, well, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And I said, I think so. He said, just do what God tells you to do, Tim. And I said, well, I'm not a very good salesman. It's not my field. I was an administrator in schools before. And so he said, well, let me give you some. And I said, so I thought he gave me a couple of copies of Life is Tremendous or something. I didn't know. And my memory is that he gave me 27 books. Okay. we went through and he handpicked all these things, everything from Life is Tremendous. I think he gave me 5 copies of that, and the Greatest Salesman, and one, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was about the guy that sold the insurance to the president of another insurance company, and so he just took this time and he said, you may not be good at it, but he said, just like you were saying, you're going to be the same person you are 5 years from now, except for the books that you read, and here's some books, and the people that you meet. And I just found that to be true in my life all along. And I told Charlie, I said, hey, look, I didn't walk in here to buy 27 books, and he said, oh, no, you're not buying the books. I'm giving you the books. And I said, well, how do I repay you, Charlie? And he said, well, you have, but he said, here's an idea. He said, take these things, and as you just live your life, just kind of take the concept that I believe in, which is books change you, experiences change you, and the people that you meet change you. And he said it's all part of God's plan. So put together a little library of books. Take these back and read them. And when you run into somebody, whether it's somebody that works with you or that's in a group with you at Bible study or whatever, he said if they need it, just give it to them. Just like I'm giving you the books that I'm giving you. So I came back and I put a little bit aside every month, and I'm on the suckers list with Amazon, obviously, because they send me all these things now. But I just put together a library, and that's what I do. And I've been doing that ever since I met your dad. And I've given Life is Tremendous to other people, other guys that needed to connect with their kids, and the impact of what Charlie. I don't think Charlie ever thought it was him, because he one of the things that he told me was, I said, well, what am I supposed to do once I give him the book, Charlie? Am I supposed to find out if they read it? Or he said, no. He said, just give him the book. He said, the rest is up to God. So, that's, to me, looking at that bookcase and seeing that little tiny white book was an answer to a prayer. And I just got as you get older, you think about the people that have had that kind of an influence on your life, and you want to say thanks. Sometimes you can't because they're not around, but sometimes you can.
Yeah.
And that's why I called you. I wanted you to know the impact that your dad had.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I don't know what to say other than to thank you. I'm sure our listeners out there know exactly. I have nothing more to add to this because Tim has put together the tremendous legacy from A to Z. And thank you, Tim, for continuing to pour into others' lives and change. And for any of you out there, this is still a real vital thing. It's how we make the world a more tremendous place. Get those books, read them, give them to people. And like Tim said, let God do the work. But I want to thank you again, Tim, for just sharing this with me. You didn't have to find me and call me, but just like you did to my father all those years ago, what a blessing you are to me. I know for our listeners out there, so many people are going to be blessed by what you're sharing.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, Tim. Listen, To our tremendous listeners, thanks so much. If you like this, you know somebody else that wants to connect with their kids, needs help being a better salesperson, just wants to learn how to live a more tremendous life, be sure and let them know to check it out. Check out some of our tremendous books and just have them listen to Tim pouring out his wisdom. Thank you so much for being a part of the tremendous legacy. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye.